Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Phillips. I lead Groundswell at Global Optimism. Good afternoon, everyone. As you all know, we are at a critical halfway point of COP29. We know the urgency that in the second week of COP29, governments have to agree an ambitious finance goal to meet their commitments already made under the Paris Agreement and the global stocktake. This is going to be key to setting us up for success in Belém at COP30. This Paris process matters. Today, Mission 2025, which is a high-ambition coalition of the world's leading businesses, investors, subnational governments, scientists, data experts, and civil society leaders, has made a call to action to G20 leaders calling for climate leadership as they prepare to meet for the G20 summit on Monday. They are asking G20 leaders for two things. Number one, to move the money by agreeing a high ambition finance goal at COP29, catalyzing the finance to meet the needs of developing countries. And two, to publish the plans by submitting climate plans by February 2025, which are 1.5 degrees aligned, sector-specific, and backed by investment-positive policies. We know that leadership at the G20 can move things here in Baku at COP29. Simon Steele, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary, has said that climate leadership at the G20 should be order of business number one. Already, two G20 countries, Brazil and the UK, have announced ambitious targets for their national climate plans. We need others to follow. To talk about why G20 climate leadership matters, we have Avinash Persaud, Special Advisor on Climate Change to the President of the Inter-American Development Bank and Professor of Gresham College. We have Maria Mendeluce, CEO of We Mean Business. And we have Joshua Ampensen, founder of Green Africa Youth Organization and co-director of the Youth Climate Justice Fund. And shortly to arrive, we have Minister Anna Tony, who I will introduce momentarily. But to kick us off, Avinash Persaud, maybe you could take us through why G20 leadership matters, particularly in the context of agreeing a strong outcome on finance here in Baku.
Because we're operating so late in the day, the amount of finance we need is enormous. It is estimated that developing countries require $2.4 trillion per year to address climate change, to address loss and damage, and to accelerate the mitigation of the climate. Today, loss and damage, because of the absence of climate finance, loss and damage is being financed. It's being financed by the poorest people. It's being financed in their loss of jobs, loss of livelihoods, loss of homes, loss of incomes. And we cannot expect mitigation. We cannot expect to save the planet from the savings of the poorest people. And that is why, with the $2.4 trillion of finance required by developing countries, at least $1 trillion must come through international finance. And that international finance will come from a variety of sources, but the core part of that finance must come from public finance, come from governments, from grants, from multilateral development banks offering concessionary loans. The Convention and the Paris Agreement are a system of climate finance. The system is based around nationally determined contributions on greenhouse gas emission reductions, and an NCQG designed to help finance ambitious NDCs. If we do not get an ambitious NCQG out of this COP, we're not going to get ambitious NDCs, and the system unravels. That is why we need, in the new NCQG, clarity on the needs, a number that reflects the needs, the $1.3 to $1 trillion per year for developing countries. And whilst we know that comes from a variety of sources, to give that number credibility, we need a real commitment from the wealthy nations of the public finance component of that, which must be at least a trebling of the 100 billion. to make credibility of the finance we need. That will only come from political leadership. And that's why we need to call upon the G20 to provide that leadership, to provide those commitments on public finance and multilateral development bank finance. The G20 are the main shareholders of the MDBs, in order to give credibility to the total finance that the planet needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avinash. An ambitious finance goal for ambitious climate plans. I'd like to welcome Minister Anatoni, thank you for coming, who is the National Secretary for Climate Change for Brazil. Minister Tony, as you know, we're speaking about the importance of G20 climate leadership and what that means in the context of COP29 and indeed COP30. And I believe no one is better placed to talk about that than you. So over to you, Minister.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Sorry for being a bit late. I couldn't agree more with what was just said. Obviously, and we have been repeating that time and time again, success of COP30 depends on success of COP29. Public finance, as was said, is absolutely key. Obviously, as we debated in G20, we wanted and need to mobilize beyond public finance, private sources and mobilization. But in order to mobilize, you need to have a very strong signal from public finance. One doesn't substitute the other. We need both. But obviously, on that core is the public finance. And especially in a moment with so much geopolitical uncertainties, we do need a strong signal coming out of COP29, of G20 that we will have on Monday and Tuesday from the G20. Obviously, we're doing utmost. But that signaling is very important. Brazil came to this COP bringing our ambitious NDC, showing that it's not lack of ambition. We do have ambition as developing countries. We do have plans. We do have projects. What we need now is a signaling that we will have the means of implementing the ambitions that we have. That's what we're hoping for every country, to come with ambitious NDCs, to show what is needed for developed or undeveloping countries to see what are the most ambitions that they have with their different capacities and responsibilities, but coming with the new ambitions. And if everybody does that, we will need to see what needs to be changed in terms of the financial instruments that we have to fulfill the ambition, rather than the other way around. We only have X amount of money, and therefore we will limit our ambitions. We need the opposite. Our ambitions is here, and how we're going to mobilize the finance that we need. And the signaling from a public finance that comes from COP29 will be absolutely key. And Brazil and the Brazilian delegation is working very close to our colleagues from Azerbaijan, obviously also with the basic colleagues, to ensure that we'll get out of Baku with a strong signaling of the NCQG or the public finance that we need. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. Brazil is certainly setting an example with its NDC, and thank you for stressing the urgency of the hour with next week. I'd like to now turn to Maria Mendeluce, who leads an enormous network of businesses with the We Mean Business Coalition. Maria, it'd be great to hear about what business is calling for in the context of G20 leadership.
Thank you. So today we just issued a statement that includes many business organizations that work with 38,000 businesses that are committed to tackle climate change. Out of those, 17,000 have set science-based targets or have joined the SME Climate Hub. These businesses are calling governments, they're calling for three things. First, to be ambitious and to present NDCs that are aligned with 1.5. Two, to come up with the policies that will implement those ambitions, that turn this into policies at national level. And third, for funding for developing countries. Let me tell you something. There is a lot of geopolitical uncertainty. We cannot ignore that. But one thing, it is true that for business, investing in clean solutions is the best way to ensure energy security. Investing in clean solutions is good because it's material to companies. Climate change is a risk and opportunity. Investing in clean solutions provides assurance for companies that they're going to reduce their costs, they're going to be more competitive, and they're going to be more prepared to contribute to bring the 1.5 within reach. So that's why it's important what we're doing here at COP and what is going to happen next week at the G20. Let me be slow so that it's very clear. Business needs long-term certitude. Business do not operate well when we change plans every 4 years. Business needs policy coherence. If a country wants to be aligned with 1.5, the policies need to go with it and promote both the transition away from fossil fuels and the investment on renewables and energy efficiency. And we need to do both because, let me remind you something that is very simple. The best way to address climate change is to stop burning fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for emphasizing the business need for political certainty at this moment. I'd like to, we're going to go to some questions actually in a moment, but before we do that, I'd like to go to Joshua Ampensem. And it would be great, Josh, to hear from you about why G20 leadership matters here in Baku, particularly as it pertains to youth, to the grassroots, and to Africa. Josh.
Thank you very much, and brilliant remarks from colleagues on the panel. Through my work at the Green Africa Youth Organization over the past 10 years, I've met with different communities and seen how generational of farmers can no longer predict the very, very skills and understanding of an occupation that they know so well because of the impacts of climate change. I'm seeing that these communities in Africa particularly are putting children at risk, whether it being looking for water, not being able to access education, and being in a position where their futures are really at risk because of their inability to sustain their livelihood and their future because of climate risk. The reason why I'm starting by sharing this is that this is the responsibility of the G20 leadership and the COP29 presidency and everyone at this place to ensure that we can deliver on commitments that are sure and make that future possible. The G20 and COP29 leaders must understand that their decisions directly impact the farmers in Kenya, the fisher folks in Mozambique, and the entrepreneurs who are building sustainable transport economy to decarbonize their countries in Africa. Their failure will mean the inability for this to happen, and for it to happen on the timescales that is needed to build resilience for the 4 billion people who live in frontline communities, who we need to protect, and we have the urgency and the responsibility to do so. We started the Youth Climate Justice Fund for 3 reasons: to empower young people to hold policymakers accountable, to raise ambition, and to build leadership. But we recognize that leadership from the global majority or the global south is already happening. Remittances alone going to the global south from those in the diaspora is $590 billion. And that is what is currently covering people's livelihood, adaptation, resilience, and loss and damage. Meanwhile, what is missing now is that promised funding, which year over year have been failed to be delivered. So the leadership of the global south is there. The ability is there, the capacity is there, the knowledge is there, the talent is there, the workforce is there. We need the G20 leadership, and right now in COP29, to build the confidence and deliver those promises that are failed year over year. We know what is at stake, and we know that if we do not deliver on this and provide a dedicated funds to frontline communities, we've already failed. The time for vague commitments is over. We need clear, accessible climate finance mechanisms that can reach grassroots level. Every delay in delivering this finance and this commitment is another community lost to floods. It is another forest destroyed and another generation's future compromised. So to the G20 and to COP29 leaders, you have the ability and the influence today to change the future. And please note that the 1.5-degree goal is not just a target, and it's not just a climate commitment. This is people's future, and it's non-negotiable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. Deliver promises and change the future today. We've got a few minutes for any questions, so if you do, please put up your hand. We have a lady at the back and this gentleman at the front. Do we have any roving microphones? Great. And if you could just say who you are and fire away.
Thais Gadalara from Climatica. I would like to ask about what is your opinion or position regarding Argentina that decided to withdraw the delegation here at the COP and probably is going to follow also US in withdraw from the Paris Agreement. How do you think this could impact the priorities of climate action at G20 and also next COP? Thank you.
Minister Tony.
Climate action is irreversible. We need just to go and continue in our path. That's what we needed to do. If there are short-term issues related to elections, different opinions of countries, I think we are totally committed to the multilateral agreement. We will preserve the regime, and we needed to focus on climate action and implementation of that.
Thank you. Américo Martins from CNN Brazil is a follow-up question, really, because we know that everyone is committed in the long term, but in the short term, Argentina, that dropped out of COP29, may block any kind of statement from the G20 about financing for climate change. So what's your reaction to that? They giving every indication in Rio that they will block any kind of agreement there.
I'm 100% sure that G20 is in really good hands back in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. I cannot predict what the debate is there. I'm here. But as I said, I think climate action, our goal is irreversible, and we should focus on that. I think that's something that we really need to do, and I'm 100% sure that G20 will do the same, is focusing on the work that needs to be done.
Thank you. We have two questions from this gentleman here and a gentleman behind him, and then we'll go to the lady on the right-hand side. Can we? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Marcio Viegas at Sustain. My question is to Maria, of course. What exactly business should ask to the countries to have in their NDCs and adaptation plans to give the certainty you are asking for?
Thank you. So, as we know, there is the headline, and then there are the plans that come with it. And business are looking for very concrete policies that are going to contribute to Article 28. Now, this will break down economy-weight targets, sectoral targets with very concrete metrics. We have heard very good examples from the UK and Brazil about what leadership looks like, and we are seeing, the detail that is coming along. It's very important that we look at this as best-class examples on what needs to come from other countries.
Thank you. We'll take the gentleman just behind the former gentleman. Thank you. And then we'll go to this lady over here.
Thank you. Gustavo from H3G. I'd like to ask Anna, what are the signals that we need to get from G20, from Lula, Xi, Biden, all the world leaders that will be there, in order to signal a strong position? We saw already TF Clima push this agenda. Some language was put, a commitment to have success in Baku. Could you share with us what we can expect to get out of the G20 and then strike a deal here?
As you mentioned, Gustavo, I think TF Clima, the Task Force on Climate from G20, was a very strong signal on what needs to happen, realigning the finance governance, to climate governance. I think that the message was very clear. I think those messages will be reinforced by G20. It couldn't be otherwise, because TF Clima has already that. And let us hope, and we do know that also Mr. Guterres is there, and we know the leadership that also he plays together with President Lula. So we are hoping to listen for all committed leaders, a very strong signal on climate, because that will be an important message to come to Baku as well. We are almost in the middle of the Baku conference. So that's what we're expecting, and hoping that they will be able to do that.
Thank you. The lady in the blue shirt just here.
Thank you so much. Jacqueline from Argus Media. I'm just going to, I want to go back to the conversation about the US and possibly Argentina withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. I was wondering, for maybe Mrs. Stoney, also linking that Maria said that businesses want certainty. Do you think maybe it's time to think about what could be the implications for these countries who may decide to withdraw from the Paris Agreement in the future to kind of guarantee that there is certainty and a clear path for all the countries?
I'll give Anna a break. I think I have been hearing, the governor of the Washington state clearly said that they want to attract investment to their state, calling that the United States of America has many states that are pushing for this agenda and want to attract investments. I'm hearing this across the world, because actually the NDCs are the investment plans of the countries. There's lots of investors that want to invest, that want to see stable and coherent policy frameworks to make those investments, because we know that the technologies are competitive, very competitive even. So it is a matter of putting the frameworks in place so that those investments will stay for the long run. We also hear from companies that have made investments in these geographies that want to stick with them, because companies do not invest in 4-year cycles. The technologies that they're investing last for 20, 30 years. And the investment decision was made because it makes good business sense. Thank you.
And quickly, 2 comments on that. In September in New York, the Youth Climate Justice Fund had a chance to support a philanthropic entity that worked with different investors and businesses with assets worth $3.5 trillion. And they made a request, and they said, can you advise us on how we can do investment in climate justice? And what does that mean? And how do we feel the assurance that the international and intergovernmental processes back this up? And this is why the second week of COP is going to be very important. How do we make sure that we leave COP with the right outcome that gives this community that sense of commitment from the multilateral and intergovernmental processes, that their investments are feeding into a process that feels and gives that sense of certainty. So I think that we are halfway through, but next week is going to be very important, because the world of business is somewhat ready, but no one is going to do this alone. And that sense of coming out of COP with a very concrete and something with confidence will be very, very important.
Thank you. Got time for one more question to the gentleman, and then we will have to depart.
Hello, Joe Lowe from Climate Home News. I'd like to ask Anna Tony about the billionaires tax proposal at the G20. Are the South African presidency going to take that up, and when are we expecting, when are you hoping for an announcement or outcome on that? Thanks.
We don't, obviously South Africa will decide to pick that up or not. It's a sovereign decision on their presidency. On G20, we were working very close to our colleagues from South Africa. But I think from the Brazilian presidency's point of view, we put that proposal on the table, has been really well received by many, many of the players. It's a tax that I think shows the way. We know there is a coalition or a task force of solidarity levies that are looking at all other global taxes. It's clear we need to find other sources of financing for climate action. I think the super rich tax goes exactly in that direction. We are hoping, obviously, to get even more support during the G20, and let us wait to see the leaders' decision this week or next week to see how far they got. But I think that by putting that proposal on the table, the debate is now in all the different places. And I think that's the type of debate that we expected. We needed to look at different sources. We know public money is vital, as I mentioned at the beginning. There are different ways, there are different taxes, super rich, aviation, carbon taxes, fossil fuel. Let us look at the implication of each of them and decide globally which of those can be most useful. But we needed to look at that. We cannot just discard that possibility. And I just want to make a comment from our colleagues that was asked about companies in the certainties that Maria talked about. Exactly, I think companies really need that certainties. Some countries have been able to give those certainties and have been consistent with their goal to achieve net zero and to be decarbonized and change their regulations to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. And I expected companies to start looking at those countries more seriously, exactly for the issue that you mentioned, because in those countries you have more consistency. And as Maria said, that consistency is a very important issue. We know that. And I think countries like Brazil has shown that consistency, and we need to see how private sector, both from other countries, react to that consistency as well.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Josh. I'm afraid we have to go. Thank you for coming. If you want to find out more about today's G20 call to action, please go to mission2025.world. Thank you.